Hey, we're going to take a little break here and talk about interstate batteries. Now, if you're like me, enjoying the great outdoors, you need gear that is as reliable as it gets. That's why I power my adventures with interstate batteries. I use interstate batteries in my boats. I use interstate batteries in my camper. Great for your truck, too. From Alaska to Montana, they're outrageously dependable. Battery is essential. With over 150,000 dealer locations, finding one is easy. For all your vehicles, land or sea, choose Interstate. Head to interstatebatteries.com and find your power today.
For all you elk hunters out there, chasing turkeys is basically the same thing. I know the reaction you just gave me, but don't knock it till you try it, and don't try it without OnX. The Hunt app will not only help you find new areas on public ground, but I use it to find out landowner info to get permission on private ground that I see birds on as well. OnX Hunt has a special offer for you. Use code CAL to receive 20% off your membership at onxmaps.com/hunt and find more birds this spring.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
From Meat Eater's World News Headquarters in Bozeman, Montana, this is Cal's Week in Review with Ryan Cal Callahan. Now, here's Cal.
Okay, hey, this week's special drop of Cal's Week in Review, brought to you, as always, by Jordan Sillers, the guy putting in the muscle and the backbone behind this podcast. You can find Jordan all over the Meat Eater universe on the website and working across podcasts. This week, we've got Steve Candell, Sam Davidson, and Michael Gibson. Michael is the Idaho policy advisor. I'm picking on him first because I've known him the longest. He's one of those goofy German short hair pointer guys and big fisherman. Sam Davidson is the policy director of California Public Lands and Communications for the Klamath Basin and Wild Steelhead Initiative. And Steve is the director a national campaign of the National Campaign Support Center for Trout Unlimited. Guys, jump in and let me know what I got right or wrong there.
No, I think you got it, Cal.
Yeah, you
Awesome.
nailed it, dude. I have the best hunting dogs ever bred, the German Shorthair Pointer.
For certain personalities, Michael, for certain personalities.
I'll just add real quick, Cal, in the sports center I work in. So I just get the opportunity to work with a variety of staff like Michael and Sam, as well as volunteers on a whole host of protection campaigns focused on cold water habitat. So it's a great role here at TU.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, so yeah, cat's out of the bag. We're talking with Trout Unlimited this week. TU is enormous. You guys are international, technically?
North America.
Yeah. And we want to also talk about national monuments. So Trout Unlimited is more than just trout. It's a habitat organization as well. And we're going to dig into that. And then national monuments isn't as a straightforward thing either. National monuments are, it's one of those things, one of those topics where everything you say about a national monument is kind of correct, but kind of not correct, because they're all individuals. And we're going to learn more about national monuments and why they can be a hunter and angler's friend, as long as you're a part of the process. sorry to tee that up in a biased way there, gentlemen, but where should we start? Michael, do you want to tell us what the heck Trout Unlimited does in Idaho?
Yeah, you bet. Obviously, we're the leaders in cold water conservation, but we also, as you alluded to earlier, we work on habitat. We also work on hunting and angling issues for sportsmen and women. We work heavily on public lands protection. We know that, obviously our bread and butter is stream restoration, stream protection, water protection, but that is sort of the basis of a lot of other things that are important to hunters and anglers. And so we work on policy issues at the state level and at the federal level, in state legislatures, in Congress, with the administration, and we make sure that trout, other wildlife, and hunters and anglers get a fair shake.
That sounds good. And then, so that's a North American overview?
Yeah, I mean, all of this stems from the North American model of wildlife conservation, in that, we have professional science-based agencies that use money raised from the sale of fishing and hunting licenses to manage our fish and wildlife, and that fish and wildlife remains in the public trust. We get to go out and enjoy it as citizens of the United States.
Darn right. And Steve, you have an interesting title there. What's happening in California? Klamath Basin Wild Steelhead Initiative. You got a lot on your plate. Or I'm sorry,
yeah, I think Sam. Yeah, Sam. Yep, go for it, Sam.
Yeah. So my job is mostly on the policy advocacy side of our work, and I also support I've worked in and out of communications for a number of years, and I support our communications of a couple of our projects, including our longtime investment in the restoration of the Klamath River, which is hitting a high point this year, as I think probably everybody has heard now, with the actual deconstruction of its 4 dams, the fourth and final of which just began, or the reported as having just begun yesterday. Ultimately that will restore access for salmon and steelhead in what was historically the third largest producer as a watershed of salmon and steelhead on the West Coast. It'll restore access to about 400 miles of historic spawning and rearing habitat in particular. So pretty exciting. And I'm
that's kind of an understatement, Sam. I mean, that's a lot happening, and a heck of a topic. I imagine that position, you're kind of a hero one minute and a goat the next, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's always different ways of looking at things. And there are folks who are convinced that taking out dams, whether on the Klamath or anywhere else, is not a great idea. In this case, it was a business decision by the owner of the dams, PacifiCorp, the utility PacifiCorp. It would have cost significantly more for them to upgrade the dams as part of the renewal of their operating license than it was. Only one of the dams was profitable in terms of energy development. They were all hydro power dams. There was no water storage or flood or virtually no flood control benefit as part of those dams. So yeah, it's kind of it's a win-win, and it's one of the, along with the Bristol Bay, and it's one of the biggest conservation wins that TU's had a hand in, certainly at least in my time here.
Well, I imagine if you're somebody who likes to angle for salmon and steelhead in the state of California, and you've been looking at your fishing window, your legal fishing season, getting cut down or be non-existent the last few seasons. You're anxious for this fourth dam to be removed and see those flows restored and get down to the brass tacks of seeing how many fish come back, right?
Yeah, that's the that's the next major phase, along with the restoration of the river, kind of the once the channels been, which it's largely reestablished itself now because they've got holes in all the bottoms of the dams and they're draining. But there's a need to restore the areas that are the former, below, that were underwater as part of former reservoirs, and stabilize those soils and slopes and things of that sort. And that's all ongoing, with largely being done by tribal work crews. So under the direction of a contractor, third-party contractor, RES, who's working with the Klamath River Renewal Corporation to do that side of things. It's pretty exciting from an angling perspective, it's super exciting. Whether you're a tribal person or a sports person, they're going to be fish, salmon and steelhead upstream of where they were able to get. The lower of the dams was called Iron Gate, and it was just upstream of the Interstate Highway 5, one of the major interstate arteries in California, connecting California and Southern Oregon. And there's going to be a temporary closure of the area of the river that's called the Reservoir Reach, between Iron Gate and the upstream reach of Copco Reservoir, for a year to monitor the fish comeback. And but then above that, in the wild trout designated water, which is from Copco to the Oregon border, that remains open, as does the fishery below Iron Gate. And the Klamath's famous for its half-pounder steelhead fishery, right? And for good reason.
It's cool. Well, yeah, I've always been amazed for a state as populous as California, how you can get out to wild places still, and the Klamath is definitely one of those destinations. So they'll have to go check her out once it's wild and free. That's a topic we could talk about all day, but since we're talking about public lands, and as Michael covered out of the gate, Trout Unlimited does a lot for public lands. And the current project is an interesting one, and it involves that big scary word that we brought up before, monument. What is the new monument, and how are we getting there?
Well, I'll jump in here real quick. And we've got sort of two that we're focused on. Sam can cover the one being looked at in California, but the Owahis in Oregon, actually, the Oahe watershed is a 7 million acre watershed that's in Oregon, Idaho, and Nevada. We've been working real hard. The Idaho portion of it was protected back in the early 2000s. We've been working for a number of years on getting protections in place for the Oregon Oahe Canyon lands. there's about 2 million acres of high value wilderness quality lands that's been either put in wilderness study area by the BLM or lands with wilderness characteristics. Senators Wyden and Merkley in Oregon have been working for a long time to try to put together legislation. There is an introduced bill in the Senate that would protect 1.1 million acres of those 2 million acres of wilderness quality lands and make them wilderness. Obviously, as you guys probably know from paying attention to fish and wildlife policy, Congress is kind of broken right now. And there's not a lot of agreement from the two sides of the aisle on how to move forward on protections. And so while the Wyden-Merkley bill is a great bill, it was put together with a number of different stakeholders and all over Oregon, and is properly introduced in front of the Senate. We're not sure of its future in Congress, and so we've started a parallel track asking the Biden administration to use their powers under the Antiquities Act to designate a monument in the Oahe Canyon lands. So we're hugely supportive of the legislation. It's a great piece of legislation. It's innovative. It's got some new things in it for flexible grazing. It's got an oversight committee that could do projects to improve rangelands out in the Oahe, but we're just not certain it's going anywhere. And so we've asked the administration to engage on a monument proposal. And those conversations continue. It's definitely a different beast than a piece of legislation, and we are cognizant of people's apprehension with that designation. But we're also committed to not just getting the signature from the president, but seeing that process through to a management plan for the monument that includes all of the stakeholders that use it. The Oahe is a unbelievable place. A lot of people talk about how we've been working on protections for the Oahes for the last 2 decades, but actually in some of our research, we unearthed a document that dates back to 1928, and it was submitted to the National Conference on Outdoor Recreation in 1928 that highlighted the Oahes as one of the crown jewels of open space and habitat in the West that needed protection. So it hasn't just been 2 decades, it's been 100 years. And then if you want to go even further back and talk about its importance to Aboriginal tribes, the Burns Paiute, the Confederated Tribes of the Duck Valley Reservation. It's got huge tribal significance out there. And so if any of you have been to Boise in the last 10 years, you'll notice that it's gotten quite big. There's probably going to be 1 million people in the Treasure Valley by the end of this decade. And with that comes a lot of impacts from recreation. There's a lot more OHV use going on out there. And then there's, your traditional threats from mining, from transmission development. And, the folks that are engaged on this campaign and looking at the Oahe, we don't want to lock anybody out of there. We want to see it be the landscape that it is right now, but it's going to be hard to keep it the way it is without some protections in place. There's unbelievable habitat for sage grouse out there. We've got interior red band trout on the landscape. You've got pronghorn, you've got mule deer, elk, and then California bighorn sheep and chucker. It's really a sportsman's paradise out there, and we want to keep it that way.
Yeah, it's a interesting chunk of ground, right? Like there's amazing things out there. The landscape's unbelievable, but it's unbelievably brutal. So despite being on the doorstep of this crazily growing fast metropolitan area, it's a great place to go out and not see a lot of people. But those same people are going to be the ones who kind of weigh in and say how they value that land, right? So the anglers are going to have a perspective. The big mule deer hunters are going to have a perspective. The upland game folks are going to have a perspective. And how does all that come together for a monument, right? The monument brings a level of federal protection to the ground, but does that mean that it's going to turn into, like the scariest thing of all, which is the place people can't go? Is it going to be preservation versus conservation? Are we going to be able to float, hunt, and fish out there for those species that you just named?
The answer to that is a resounding yes. It will not lock people out. Our hope is that we can protect fragile habitat and still allow access. We are committed as Trout Unlimited and all of our sportsmen's partners to making sure that hunting and fishing and access persist out there. Will you be able to drive a motor vehicle to every square inch of that landscape? No. But will you be able to access important places to hunt and fish? Yes. And we're at the table making sure that happens.
For all you elk hunters out there, chasing turkeys is basically the same thing. I know the reaction you just gave me, but don't knock it till you try it, and don't try it without OnX. The Hunt app will not only help you find new areas on public ground, but I use it to find out landowner info to get permission on private ground that I see birds on as well. OnX Hunt has a special offer for you. Use code CAL to receive 20% off your membership at onxmaps.com/hunt and find more birds this spring.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater.
We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time: Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. It's really simple. When you pour it in your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it clean your fuel system. You probably know someone who has used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again. I guarantee you've listened to them, because I use it
regularly. People everywhere rely on Seafoam to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way they should the entire season. Help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
I guess we should cover a couple of the other major uses out there, right? Which would be grazing. That's kind of like a historical use in that area. Basically, the only people started out there off of mining claims, I think. But what any of those kind of quote unquote extractive uses fall into consideration, Michael?
No. Well, grazing would persist. There would be nobody's going to lose their grazing permits out there. We think with some additional resources and working with ranchers, we could improve habitat and the impacts of grazing, but we're not trying to move any cows off of there. As far as extractive resources, monuments would not allow new mining claims. Existing mining claims would be unaffected. There would be a higher level of scrutiny on transmission projects and other industrial impacts out there. But in general, existing uses would persist.
Got it. And what? Why is the monument designation the tool of choice for this area?
Well, like I said earlier, we would be hugely supportive if Congress could get a wilderness bill done. We think Wyden and Merkley have put in some good work on that, but it's not seeming like it's in the cards. And so the Antiquities Act gives us an avenue to get this place protected. And then the hard work would begin of writing a monument plan to manage that area. And like I say, the big thing there is putting it off limits to new mining claims, putting some solid sideboards on transmission development, and then also having a really solid travel management plan that we make sure we protect high value habitat while still allowing access.
It's huge once you get out there. So yeah, the travel portion is something that's kind of tricky, right? You want to be able to provide a certain level of equitable access, right? Which is going to include, to some degree, I would think, side by side, single track use, but at the same time, you have the greater sage grouse out there that is, honestly, this Owyhee country could be years down the road with the way the sage grouse is trending, could be like the last holdout of the greater sage grouse because it's just so big and remote, and you can't have folks running over old growth sagebrush.
It is a really amazing landscape. I spent a ton of time out there hunting chukar in the fall. You do not want to go out there without an inReach and an extra spare tire, or you could be in for a long day.
Yeah, when that little yellow lab gets bit by a rattlesnake, it's a long way out to a vet. I'll tell you from personal experience.
It sure is. But it is probably it is one of the largest landscapes still left in the lower 48 where there's significant opportunity for conservation, especially for sage grouse habitat and other game.
Oh, and seeing those desert bighorn down there is amazing. Like watching the way that they move through that crazy rim rock country. I've sat on top of those rims and watched brown trout feed subsurface because the water's so clear through my 15 by 56s. So that's not an experience everybody gets. It's pretty wild. Tons of raptors. It's amazing country. I want to swing back to timing and the Antiquities Act and how we ensure that we can keep what's important to us if we mobilize around this idea of a monument. So just keep that in mind, Michael. But Sam, what's happening on the California side?
So we're the campaign that we're heavily vested in now here is to gain national monument designation for this area of public lands, about a little over 200,000 acres of mostly the Klamath National Forest. It's actually administered by 3 forests up there, the whole area, and it's called the Medicine Lake Highlands, or in the language of the Pit River tribe, whose homeland it is. It's called Satitla, and this area is this campaign is relatively new. It just launched last November, and it's one of these kind of extraordinary places that have been a little bit maybe under the radar from folks who aren't locals up there, but which has kind of remarkable implications for hunting and fishing. This area is really unique geologically and hydrologically. It's the largest remnant of the largest shield volcano in North America, and the landscape's very porous. It's very rugged and very porous, and that whole complex stores and filters as much water as mostly from snowmelt as California's 200 largest surface reservoirs. So it's this amazing reserve of cold, clean water, and it drains in sort of an unusual way. Most of it drains to the southeast and into the Fall River Valley, where it comes out of the ground in a variety of springs. There's a complex of springs there, the Fall River Springs, which are the largest spring system in California and one of the largest in the Western U.S. And it's the principal source, possibly even the sole source of water for one of the most famous trout fisheries in the West, which is the Fall River. And that's California's largest spring creek. That river system, because of the springs, has unique chemistry, and it's really prolific in terms of growth of weeds, hatches of insects, and trout, which are consistently, what would be considered trophy-sized trout in a lot of rivers. It's mostly a float fishery, but our interest in this is largely because of that connection between the Fall River and its trout fishery and that kind of unique trout population there, and the highlands. And there are water bodies and fishing opportunities up higher, as well as pretty good upland game opportunities. It's the X1 zones, one of the areas bracketed by a couple of California's X zones, deer hunting zones. And there's turkey, pronghorn, mule, and black deer, up there, quail. It's a relatively remote and it's still relatively unspoiled area that the Pitt River tribe has decided after decades of fighting to preserve that area and their cultural heritage and importance of it to them, from things like energy development. It's in particular, there's a big for many years, and there are a number of leases outstanding for this purpose to develop geothermal energy facilities. So anyway, there's a lot. It's one of these kind of last best places for hunters and anglers in California, certainly, and probably in the Western U.S. And I would also say, with respect to, some of your questions earlier, Cal, about monument, designation, what that does or doesn't do for sports people. I think of it as like we're actually, like, monument designation actually preserves for the I can only think of one place where there was any conflict with a pre-existing with hunting and fishing that were pre-existing uses. And that's being rectified. That's in the Castle Mountains National Monument here in California, and that's getting fixed. Everybody agrees that was a mistake. It's National Park Service administered, which was the principal source of the problem there. And so National Monument designation actually is one of the best ways of keeping things as they are, including access for traditional uses, including fishing and hunting. And when there's we're not making any more super high quality habitat. We have to, and with the things getting hotter and drier in a lot of parts of the country and the world, there's a lot of, we have to do more faster to protect it. So in this case, National Monument designation makes a lot of sense, in particular for the Satitla area, the Medicine Lake Highlands, which is an area of kind of really extraordinary scientific as well as cultural value, that the designation makes a lot of sense under the Antiquities Act.
And I think it's worth emphasizing, Sam and Cal, that these monuments we're talking about on Forest Service and BLM land, I don't think it was already said that management of fish and wildlife populations stay with the state fish and wildlife agencies. I think that's often misunderstood. It gets confusing quickly because monuments certainly apply to BLM and Forest Service lands, but they can also be designated on federal lands managed by the National Park Service or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But we're talking about, again, BLM Forest Service lands. Nothing changes in terms of the authority that those state fish and wildlife agencies have. And it's been really interesting to see, you said it before, Cal, these are flexible management tools and ways to protect these areas. We've seen in some recent monuments in the last year, places like the Grand Canyon National Monument, Avicuame National Monument in Nevada, where they even added additional language just to clarify that point, that these state agencies, certainly retain that authority, have the flexibility to continue working with the federal land management agencies on a whole host of habitat management projects. So it doesn't tie the hands. It kind of is business as usual for that relationship between the states and the feds.
Thanks, Steve. Jordan Sillers here for the listening audience. As regular listeners will know, Cal frequently works while out in the field. And he had a storm roll in which cut off his connection to Elon Musk and Starlink. So I'm going to go ahead and continue this super fascinating conversation. Michael, you had mentioned that once the president designates a monument, then you said the hard work of putting a plan together starts. Could you talk a bit about who controls that process? How long does it take? And then also, do people have a chance to weigh in on that?
Yeah, there is, after the designation of a monument, there is a period of time where a management plan needs to get written. We obviously support having as many stakeholders at the table to discuss that management plan. It depends on the landscape as far as how long it takes for that management plan to be in place. It can happen in as fast as a year, or it can take a little longer than that, depending on what's going on the landscape. But those are put together by the whichever agency the monument is designated under. So in the case of the Owahis in Oregon, it would be the Bureau of Land Management and Department of the Interior that would run that process of getting a management plan in place.
And then, Sam, does it kind of look similar in California?
Well, for the Satilla Monument, it would be the Forest Service would be the oversight. It would remain the oversight agency. There's historically, most national monuments were managed by the National Park Service. And now, for the last 10 years or so anyway, maybe slightly longer, new monument designations have mostly been not kind of created out of whole cloth, but have been created as for areas of super high values for recreation, for habitat, for water sources, for cultural reasons, et cetera, that are managed by the Forest Service or the BLM. And in those places, those agencies have, to my knowledge, remain the administrators of the monument. I think there's, based on experience that we've had in some monuments since, I think there's a better understanding now on the part of those agencies that putting together monument plans, plans for managing the monuments properly in accordance with the purpose for which they were established, including hunting and fishing opportunities, is a higher priority. And so I think there's some optimism that we'll see more emphasis on that for new monuments going forward, and certainly on from our perspective and that of our partners working on these campaigns with us. We're committed to helping them do that and engaging hunting and fishing folks in that process from the get-go.
I think it's worth mentioning too, Jordan, the more of the recent monument designations. I'll go back to the Grand Canyon example. Once they're designated, they create advisory committees. It's part of the monument designation. And these advisory committees have representation, certainly tribal representation from grazing permittees. I know in the Grand Canyon example, they do have some seats available for folks in the angling and hunting conservation world. And then they also had a specific mention of a seat at the table for Arizona Game and Fish. So just one more opportunity to get a good collection of folks around a table to, as Michael said, kind of roll up your sleeves and work through a whole list of issues. A lot of these issues are where the kind of rubber meets the road for your public land anglers and hunters. So staying engaged in those processes is important and can result in some good outcomes for folks.
Yeah, and it's probably worth jumping in here too, and because this comes up a lot in conversations, but a monument is only the federal land that it's designated over. So not private land's not affected, state land's not affected. It is in the case of the Owahis in Oregon, it would only be BLM federally owned land that would be under this management plan.
That's a good. I'm glad you clarified that, because I think sometimes people think a monument is sucking up, all these other types of land and turning it into a monument, but it's just federal land that is under a different designation is now under a monument designation. I think a lot of hunters and anglers, probably some listening, when they hear that something is going to be a national monument, and we've touched on this, a little bit already. There's a concern there that this land will be no longer available for access. And when we talk about different stakeholders having a seat at the table, one of those stakeholders, could potentially be folks who want to preserve that land as opposed to conserve it for multiple uses. They don't want to see people on it. They don't maybe like hunting and fishing. How can folks make sure that land stays open? What are some things that our listening audience can do to make sure that they still have access to those lands?
Yeah, I think I can jump in. I think, again, just to make clear that, the authority for managing those fish and wildlife populations stays with the states. That should put their minds at ease. So, for example, Browns Canyon National Monument was designated back in 2015 here in my home state of Colorado. Elk tags, fishing licenses still managed and distributed by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So that doesn't change. That's key with these BLM Forest Service national monuments that they don't want to lose sight of. But once designated, once you kind of have those general sideboards for management, and Michael touched on this well, really we're just talking about maybe 2 or 3 core things about no new leasing for energy development, no new staking of mining claims. And then also the third one I don't think Michael touched on was it prohibits the sale and transfer of federal public lands within that monument boundary. That just makes me think back, Jordan, to years ago when we had some bad ideas, percolating in Congress and state capitals about selling off large tracts of federal public lands. And that issue in particular, I never saw anglers and hunters rally together better than around that issue to push it back and stomp it out. So people should feel good about that part of monuments as well. It keeps that federal public lands in place, make sure your favorite places to fish and hunt don't get sold unbeknownst to you. So that's worth mentioning. And then, back to the planning efforts. Everyone has their favorite hunting grounds, their favorite places to fish, but engaging in those processes, those travel management planning processes that Michael alluded to, that's where, again, you're kind of talking road by road, trail by trail. But again, in some of the more recent monument designations, I keep thinking back to Grand Canyon last year. There was specific language in there about providing reasonable access for hunting, fishing, habitat management. So those issues have come up in a number of these designation processes. People should keep bringing them up, but they haven't gone overlooked. The BLM Forest Service has heard those concerns and worked some of that language into these proclamations, which essentially offer kind of initial blueprint for managing these areas until you go through a more extensive planning process.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on that one too, and that is a key piece of a monument is this proclamation language, which identifies what they call objects, which are the important things on the landscape that need to be protected. And one of the reasons that Trout Unlimited and its partners in the hunting and angling community have engaged on monuments is when we start writing those proclamations, we make darn sure that hunting and angling is part of the proclamation.
Absolutely. So what should people do if they want to see these monuments designated? Who should they be contacting?
Well, we've got a lot of resources on tu.org. We've got a landing page for both of these campaigns. We're working with partners in the sportsmen and women community, the National Wildlife Federation, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers are working on the Oregon Awahis. They've all got their own avenues of entry, but it's real easy to go to tu.org and find these landing pages. We've got petitions that can be signed. Those are tracked and periodically given to decision makers in Washington, D.C., the administration, as well as the Oregon and California designate congressional representatives, and add your name to those petitions. keep informed on what's going on. As we pick up steam here towards the end of 2024, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to engage.
I'd add, Jordan, I'll make a quick plug for in 2023 to you and some of those same partners that Michael just mentioned. We put together a monument report just because most people don't have a good sense of what they are, what they do, what they don't do. So if you go to tu.org, if you just go into your favorite browser and type in Trout Unlimited National Monument Report, it'll come up. And it does takes a deeper look at, again, the details of national monuments. And also it looks back at 4 different monuments designated years ago. Browns Canyon here in Colorado is one of them, Oregon Mountains, Desert Peaks in New Mexico, Missouri River Breaks. And it really takes a deeper dive into looking at, since monument designation, what did it mean for the hunting and fishing? And I think the take-home message is that when these monuments are done the right way, kind of how we're describing, with good input from anglers and hunters, they can be a net benefit for communities as well as public land hunters and anglers. And those 3 places I mentioned, the list goes on, offer some world-class hunting and fishing opportunities.
Yeah, I would recommend, and we'll link to this report, this National Monuments report, at themeateater.com/Cal. So if anyone wants to check it out, I would definitely recommend it. It's super interesting. Lots of great photography in there. So yeah, check that out. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you're all coming on and talking about this topic with us. Anything else that you wanted to mention before we sign off here?
Well, just thank you guys for giving us a platform and getting the word out. These are important landscapes for the hunting and angling public. We need to be aware of this. There's plenty more that need attention too. So I would just encourage your listeners to stay informed and get involved. We need your voice.
Absolutely. Michael Gibson, Steve Candle, Sam Davidson, thank you guys so much. And thank you all for listening. We will see you next time here on Cal's Week in Review.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more. That's seafoamworks.com to learn more.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you killed. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.